Welcome to the family.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Urban Wellness Now. I'm Cynthia Brooks. So glad that you've joined us on this particular weekend. I hope you are having fun with your family and doing some relaxation. And if you have to work, well, my thing about that is just be thankful that you have work. So many people don't. So we're going to, for the next hour, we are going to have a very special conversation. I've got three professionals all at once on this show. And so listeners, you're getting 3 times the information. I'm so happy to have them. They call themselves 3 docs and a mic. And they're all sisters, biological sisters. So I want to welcome to the show now Dr. Sophronia Johnson, Dr. Kamoya Johnson, and Dr. Riaja Johnson. And ladies, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having
us. Okay.
Thank you.
First, absolutely. Let's start with introductions so our listeners can get to know who you are. And so I want you to introduce yourself and explain your field of expertise to the listeners. So we'll start with Dr. Riaja, since you're right up there in front.
Greetings all. My name is Dr. Riaja Johnson. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and my area of expertise, or the area that I have been trained to work in, is health psychology. So I work with patients who have physical conditions, but also are experiencing like emotional distress, or they have a mental health diagnosis.
That is so important. We're going to get into that because the body, physical, mental, it all works together. So that's really important, Dr. Riaja. Okay, great. So Dr. Kamoya.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My doctorate is in educational psychology, and I actually work in the field of restorative justice and conflict resolution. And so I help individuals and humans learn to be in better space with each other, and thus fostering a positive relationship. And so we're in relationship, with everybody. And so we can make it intentional or unintentional, and we have control over that. And that's what I do.
Super important. And we're definitely going to talk about restorative justice because that is something we can all learn from and use in our lives. All right. And Dr. Sophronia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Sophronia Johnson. I hold a PhD in biomedicinal chemistry. However, I have chosen the academic route. So I am a higher education administrator. So I oversee natural sciences, so biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, those things that lead you into other professional careers and higher education. So what I'm working on now is really working on leadership and transformational leadership within organizations, and also making sure that my faculty and staff have the best that they need for themselves as well as my students.
What kind of higher education institution is it that you work in?
So I'm at Life University, which is in Marietta, Georgia.
And that's a chiropractic college?
It's a primarily chiropractic college, but we do have a vibrant and upgrowing undergraduate institution as well. So I am a assistant dean in the undergraduate program.
Okay, all right. I asked that because it's so important to get more African Americans, especially, into these types of professions. So we're glad that you're there and making a difference and can help. So all 3 of you have some wonderful credentials and areas that we need to talk about for our listeners to help us lead better lives. That's what it's all about. So, all right, we've got about 3 minutes left in this segment. I want each of you to take 1 minute if you can. Dr. Riaja, tell me a little bit about, just in 1 minute, we're going to get into it more later, about the whole, paying attention to the whole self.
As you mentioned before, our health consists of the whole being. We can't actually separate our physical from our mental, although they do that with regards to payment, insurance payments and so forth. However, we are a whole being. And I always, when I say health, I always have to say, what do I mean by health? So I mean physical, mental, spiritual, relational, financial. So the whole body is what, and the whole being is what I refer to when I think about health.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Dr. Kamoya, in 1 minute, tell us what restorative justice is all about.
Restorative justice is a way of having intentional relationships, building, maintaining, sustaining positive relationships. So when harm and conflict may happen, conflict is normal, harm should never be normalized. So when it does happen, then there are ways of pulling actually people in closer to make them accountable versus marginalizing them and pushing them away.
And we're going to talk about some of those ways that can make people accountable. That don't involve violence. That's the whole thing. So, and Dr. Sophronia, in 1 minute, can you kind of give our listeners background as to why it's so important, especially to have people of color in a lot of these helping professions, medical helping professions?
Definitely. So if we have representation in those areas, then people in our community, they're more willingly to go into the offices in order to seek help, and they feel a little bit more comfortable with that. So it is very important to make sure that we have representation across all diasporas and across all of the different medical fields that are there to help communities to build.
Okay, all right. And I love that you're all sisters and that you all are, I mean, your parents must be incredibly proud.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
come from a large family, right?
We do. We have, there's 10 children in the family, our parents raised.
All right. All right. So we've got a lot to talk about. So ladies, when we come forward, we're going to delve into more of each of your various fields to help our listeners understand some things that they can go ahead and apply to their life as early as right now, today. So this is Urban Wellness Now, and this is KBLA Talk 1580. And welcome back to Urban Wellness Now. I am Cynthia Brooks. Happy to have in the studio with me today 3 wonderful ladies who all have their doctoral degrees in different areas, different helping profession areas, and giving advice today on different things that relate to living your best life. So let's start with Dr. Riaja Johnson, who is a health psychologist, and give us an example of how that manifests itself, your specialty. So someone with chronic pain, for example, tell us how it's mind, body, and soul.
Okay, so chronic pain is very common, and a lot of people present to primary care setting complaining about chronic pain. And pain impacts us in multiple ways. Obviously, it impacts us physically, but it also impacts our behaviors. It impacts our emotions. It impacts us socially in our relationships. So kind of starting with physical, chronic pain is tricky because people still feel pain after whatever injury they had has healed. Right, so they want to get relief, and so physically they're hurting. Typically with chronic pain, at some point people stop believing that these people are in pain, and so they're really suffering.
You mean medical professionals stop?
Absolutely, medical professionals as well as people in their lives.
Oh, okay.
So that's a great segue to relationships. So at the beginning, people are there for them. You know, they want to help them. But as the symptoms drag on, it may be a point where people kind of distance themselves, or the person in pain distances themselves, or they start demanding more and more from their social group because of their pain, which obviously will impact relationships.
And people
It-
and their friends and network don't understand why. They see them
Exactly.
walking
Exactly.
around functioning.
Correct. And then it impacts their behavior. So with behavior, when people are hurting, they don't want to do things that they used to do. They want to rest. And contrary to what we want to do, the best thing for people in pain to do is actually to move more. Because the more you rest, the more your muscles atrophy and the harder it is for you to get up and go. And then emotionally, it's when you're in pain, you start developing depressive symptoms. You start developing anxious symptoms. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle where one thing impacts the other thing. And so a way to kind of break that cycle is what I like to do is always focus on what do the patients value? What's valuable to you? Let's start there. What are the things that you value? Now let's talk about, okay, how can you actively engage with those things that you value? So really doing things in spite of the pain. So you can still you can still live a whole and full life in spite of the pain. And not focusing so much on the pain actually decreases the pain sensation. So if you're not hyper focused on the pain, you don't feel it as much, even if it's there, but it's not like hyper, you're not hyper focused on it. So yeah, so it's not as intense. That's the word that I'm looking for. Sorry, I lost my words.
That's okay.
But it's not as intense.
I imagine there are some mental exercises to do for that, to help with that.
Oh, absolutely. So there's relaxation exercises. So relaxation exercises can look very different for different people, but I always start with the breath. I say that's the foundation, is diaphragmatic breathing, breathing in through your nose, where you kind of feel your stomach poke out a little bit, and then breathe out slowly. You can breathe out slowly through your mouth. Some people prefer to breathe out through their nose, but it's really about slowing down the breath and just being more conscious of how you're breathing.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, and then some other things to kind of add to that is I like to use like visualization. So visualize that you're in a place of comfort and peace to you. What relaxes you? And then when you find that place, use your 5 senses. So what can you see? What can you touch? What can you hear? What can you smell? And what can you taste? And that's something that you can do anywhere. You can be, standing in line at the grocery store. You can be, I don't know, driving in a car, on a bus. That's something that you can do anywhere. And what that does is that distracts you from your pain. It takes you to your, for lack of a better term, happy place.
I was just going to say that, happy place. We all need to have a happy place.
Yes, absolutely. And also using your support system is important, but not using your support system in a way that they feel like our relationship is surrounded by your pain. And the way that I'm always relating to you has to deal with your pain. Go to those social functions. Yeah, go out to those social functions. And when you're there, your conversation should not surround how much pain you're in. Talk about other things. There's other parts of your life besides your pain. You are a whole person, and your pain is such a small part of that. So those are just a couple of things that are very helpful for people when they're dealing with chronic pain. And just to understand that I understand that the pain is real, and I never ever want to diminish the experience that people are having. But as I mentioned before, you can live a whole healthy life in spite of the pain.
Excellent. Love it. Love it. And there's so many people that need to hear those words. So yes, it does affect our relationships. And Dr. Kamoya Johnson is in a field where she helps folks repair relationships that have been harmed. Dr. Kamoya, explain a little bit about restorative justice and what kinds of settings that these practices and principles work in.
Sure, thank you. First and foremost, the term restorative justice, Howard Zehr brought to the US by observing Indigenous folks in New Zealand and across the world. And so as a criminologist, he brought it into the criminal legal system. And so it was a way of having the person who is the recipient of the harm actually be the focus versus the person who is the wrongdoer, right? The person who's responsible for the harm. And that's a different way of thinking about how we affect others and how our behaviors actually have this butterfly effect, right? So even if I harm someone specifically, that butterfly effect, then, their family members, their community, all of those things, they have those, everybody's harmed. And so really bringing folks together with true accountability, having to sit with those folks that I've harmed and actually say, wow, I did this. I'm willing to take responsibility. What do I need to do to make things as right as possible? I cannot go back and undo it, but I can redress the issue. And so as a collective, as a community, we come together and we talk about what are the needs and obligations of the person who's responsible, as well as the community, and how can we move forward with this? And it has to be something that's realistic, right? And so when we think about restorative justice from the criminal legal stance, there's restorative justice processes happen for everything you can think of. And it takes prep work. And sometimes that prep work could be a year. Sometimes that prep work could be 3 hours. It just depends on the layers and the saturation of the harm or conflict that has occurred.
Give us an example. Give us an example of maybe a case or a situation that you're currently working on.
So a lot of my experience is in education. And in education, there's so many different layers of parties that make up the educational system. We have the teachers, we have the parents, we have the students, we have administration and the district folks. And so many different layers. And in education, restorative justice actually starts with laying the foundation, which is community building. Because if we don't have community building and we're not getting to know each other in a different way, then what are we restoring back to, right? And so thinking about really intentionally building community and having those intentional relationships, we're less likely actually to have harm, and we're less likely to have those saturated conflicts that can occur. Again, I mentioned earlier that conflict is normal. We are actually in conflict multiple times in our lives, intra-conflict and inter-conflict, right? Inside and between others. And so when we think about conflict is a huge concept. And if I'm giving an example without telling someone else's business, it's kind of hard. And so I won't give an example, but I will say that the way that I like to think about it, even when I go into organizations and help them actually talk about conflict, most saturated conflict comes from miscommunication and lack of communication. And in school, we learn all these great soft skills when we're in elementary school, but for some reason, once we get to middle and high school and college, and out into the professional world, those soft skills are not valued as much. And so that's why I stay in business, because people deal with conflict very differently. And if we can actually bring this into the educational system intentionally and continue to build those relationships with folks and actually have folks lean into conflict, it's less likely to actually become a saturated situation where now a professional has to come in and kind of hold the space so that folks can have a conversation. And that's really what it is. We sit in a circle and we have a conversation. We invite everybody who's involved, may even have some support folks, some people that not even involved, but they're support folks for the person who's responsible and the person who's received the harm. and we're having a conversation. What do we need so that we can move forward in an authentic way, right? What do we need? And it's not what does, this judge need, or what does, I forgot what it is, like you harm the state of whatever, right? When we go into the criminal legal system, it's actually, no, you actually harmed me. What do I need? What do I need to move forward? And that's a hard concept. That's a really hard concept. And so I can give you examples of what restorative justice has been used for in the criminal legal system as well in the educational system. So in the criminal legal system, it's been used for really tough cases like murder. You cannot bring somebody's loved one back once you take their life. It's been used for extreme harms, rape, disfigured, right? Just random attacks where the person is actually left disfigured. And there's actually a lot of people out there that are the person who's responsible and the person who's received the harm are actually going around and telling their story. And they're telling their story not for fame and fortune. They're telling their story so that people can make different choices. This is what happened to us. This is how I truly healed mentally, physically, emotionally, all of those things, right? And Dr. Yaja mentioned after the physical scars have healed, the mental and emotional are so deep. It's so deep, and people do not want that weight. And so in the educational system, I actually talk about that physiological response that we have when we're in conflict or when we've made a poor choice, right? And we've affected somebody else. I talk about that physiological response. I talk about what's running through your mind. What are you thinking and feeling at the time? And our first question is actually what happened? Just tell me what happened. Some folks start, I will tell you this piece, a group of 6th graders actually started in 1st grade. Well, in 1st grade, they did this to me. So in 2nd grade, I did this to them. And so imagine if our babies are carrying that for so many years.
Wow. So wait a minute, wait.
Adults.
Kamoya, the issue started when they were like 6. And now they're 10, 11, 12 years old.
Exactly. Wow. And they're holding that. And so I just talk, and then we introduce conversation just around closure. Like, what does it mean to actually let it go? Take that off your shoulders so you can move through the world lighter. Right? So sitting in space is actually a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift for the person who's responsible, and it focuses on the person who actually received the harm. So it's a gift all the way around. And although it's scary and it's tough, it is not an easy space to sit in. It is difficult. It's extremely uncomfortable. But when you move through it and come out on the other side, it is amazing. It is amazing. I have seen people really have true, strong friendships after that.
Wow.
Like
the harmer
shake their
and the person that got harmed and the person that did the harm are friends after going through this process?
Absolutely. I mean, even parents who have sit in space, and of course, if you're harming my baby, I'm gonna feel some type of way, right?
Yeah.
And so even parents are like inviting the person who has harmed their child to a play date. So we're setting up a different environment. So now we're modeling the behavior we want to see in our young people, and our young people understand that even if you make poor choices, we're not going to discard you. We still love you, and we love you so much that we're actually going to hold you accountable for your actions. And when we hold you accountable for your actions, guess what? We're holding ourselves accountable for our actions, because we're also responsible for holding the environment. And that environment does not need to be conducive to fostering harm and hurt and pain. It needs to be conducive for fostering love and connection and positive relationships.
There's so many parents too that can use this kind of information to help repair relationships with their teenagers. And okay, so Dr. Sophronia, we only have about 30 seconds left. When we come forward, don't feel bad. Your information is just as important, but people are getting a lot of information. So I'm glad we have the whole hour. So when we come forward, we're going to talk a little bit about your profession in higher education and the healing professions, and how people can get into that if they feel the urge, and why it's so important for folks of color to get into that. So Keep it right here on KBLA Talk 1580. All right, this is Urban Wellness Now. I'm Cynthia Brooks, and today we're talking with three sisters who all have their doctoral degrees in different areas, all of them though in the helping profession that touches on mind, body, and soul. So we have yet to hear from the third sister, Dr. Sophronia Johnson. She works in higher education, specifically in the medical higher education. Dr. Johnson, again, emphasize the important connection between Black people and seeing a Black person in the white coat. If you have to go to the doctor, if you have to go to a psychologist, whatever, seeing another person, let's not discount the importance of that. Please explain why that is a big deal.
Right. So when we go to, when any person, so we have those familiarities that we have with other people. And although we don't try to live in our biases, we all have biases. So if we see someone who looks more like us, we'll be more, oh, okay, I think I'm going to go try that person out. Or they may have the opposite bias that, ooh, they look like me, I'm going to not try that person out. So we have to acknowledge both spectrums on that end. But in most communities, and especially in the Black community, where we do have some of skeptics towards other ethnic groups and why they're infiltrating or why they are placed in particular areas within our community. So sometimes when we see a profession, a health profession that looks like us, we're more likely to go to that professional and to ask them questions. So it helps to disarm the person in a way that they feel like, oh, this is like talking to my mom, or I'm talking to my father about this, or I'm talking to a cousin about this. And it's not really, oh, you're Dr. So-and-so, you know, you're the authority, so I can't talk to you about this. So having that that ability to sort of relate to someone else really helps them to open up more to that professional. So the importance of getting more professionals into the field helps with that. It helps to build community. It also helps to increase our longevity as a community, but as well as our health and wellness within the community as well, because now we're not apprehensive about going to a professional.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of research about how this can help close some of those health disparities by having more Black people and minorities in general in these professions. What is your particular institution doing for more outreach to African Americans?
So I would speak on general terms as far as what most of the professionals in the professional program that we work with at Life University are chiropractics. So all health professions are trying to reduce that health disparity. We are trying to go into communities and making sure that they understand what health and wellness means, from the farm to table, from the just the regular practices. And Dr. Riaja was talking about different things to sort of decompress and de-stress yourself, taking yourself out of that to reduce anxiety. And then Dr. Kamoya also mentioned about having those healing circles. So making sure that the harmer and the harmed one that was harmed understand what those sensations are in the body, so that they can recognize those sensations early. So all health professions right now are really trying to go into the communities and making sure that they have those tools necessary to be successful. So what my role is in higher education is that we train doctors, or we train people to go into those health profession fields. So since I'm on the undergraduate side, so I take students from high school and train them in the basic foundations that they need to go on into professional schools. So making sure that they have their foundations in math, science, and the reading capacity as well as comprehension in order to make those difficult decisions and go into those critical thinking fields. So we at Life University, since we're a chiropractor, we're a vitalistic institution, which means that we have the body has an innate ability to heal itself once you remove those interferences from the body. So when I take that same vitalistic approach with everything that I do, from the students from the middle school all the way up through the professions in the chiropractic program, is that if I can remove those interferences that are stopping you from get the education that you need, then you innately will go forward and you will move to become successful within your educational career.
Excellent. If there's parents listening, which I'm sure there are, parents of school-age children, how can they spot and then encourage their child who seems to have a knack for STEM, and continue to encourage that and nurture that?
Right. So that's very important because STEM education starts when they're born. So we are all innately born with this discovery, right? This ability to explore this brand new world that we're in. I would say to allow the children to discover. So making sensory boards, making sure that they understand that exploration is normal, not projecting our fear on them as long as they're exploring in a safe way. I'm not telling them to jump off the building. I'm telling them to climb up to the building and then take some steps back down the ladder until they feel comfortable to jump off the ladder, right? So we want them to explore, but we want them to do it at their own pace. If we continue to cultivate that curiosity in children, then they'll naturally become scientists, or they'll naturally become doctors, or they'll naturally become a person who has empathy for other people, because now they're exploring a field that's outside of themselves. I would definitely encourage math and science camps to students from K through third grade, just to make sure that their skills are there and that they're comfortable knowing how to do math and science. Sometimes around the 5th, 6th grade areas when it's not cool to be a scientist anymore. It's not cool to explore. It's like the science fair is coming up and they're like, nah, I don't want to do that because everybody's gonna think I'm a nerd. It's okay to be a nerd. Nerds are cool, right? So we have to really
Nerds run the world, really.
they have to run the world because people have to think. So we want to continue cultivating those thinkers. And even if they don't enter into a science fair, but they still have that ability to still think forward and to make those decisions. Be able to encourage them to explore things that are unfamiliar to them, whether it's environments, whether it's cultures, whether it's just different religions, whatever it is, encourage them to explore and to ask questions. So that really helps set them up for when they're writing those papers and those essays and to get into college, they have a more vast knowledge and they have this exploration that the college wants to see them to be part of their community on campus. So and then once they get into college, really excel into your sciences. If you're going into medical school, graduate school, PA school, PT school, DO school, whatever professional program you're going into, it is going to take those basic foundations in science and math in order to be successful there. So encourage them to take their biology, chemistry, physics, their calculus, make sure that they're successful. So when they're sitting for their GRE, DT, their PSAT, whatever their test they're sitting for, they're comfortable sitting for that test and knowing that they have that knowledge. And then as a parent, just always be supportive. And if you don't know as a parent, it's okay to reach out. And there's plenty of organizations out there that they can reach out to. The school district has plenty of resources for every student interested in any field. So definitely reach out to them as well.
I know these days a lot of parents are telling their kids, I just don't know that. I didn't learn that, but we're going to find you some help. So yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. This is a question for your parents, but since they're not here, maybe you all can speak on this. How in the world did they get all of you? What kind of environment were you raised in? All of you have your doctoral degrees and are doing well, and that's a parent's dream for their children to just soar. So tell me about your environment growing up. Whoever wants to speak.
I guess I'll go first since I was
Okay.
I'm the eldest daughter.
Oh, okay. All right.
Growing up, my parents really encouraged exploration. They encouraged us to be critical thinkers. We used to play puzzles where we would have maybe 50 wooden puzzles and we'll dump all of them into a pile and we race to make the puzzles to fit them together. So, and it was always a thing because you always wanted to beat the other person, right? So we always tried to make the puzzles fit together. We had a book, we had a clear, it was an anatomy doll that we had to put all the organs back in together again and to do all those things. So we had a lot of different things that really kept our interest. My father was really, he was a chef by training. So he was in the kitchen and all of his science experiments he was doing in the kitchen was fascinating to me. But then he was also going out and he was fixing the brakes on the car. And I was like, whoa, engines are pretty cool too, so I wanted to learn more about that type of thing. So it was always that getting things, making sure that we had things to do, but they were constructive in all of our lives. My mom, she went to school when I was in high school. She was actually a student there as well. She was an early education student at the high school. And so she was in class with my friends. So she was taking notes, and then she would take her notes and then transcribe all of her notes. And then the instructor at the end of the term was like, wow, that's a great book. Can I have it? So it was just all that really great, just an example to set
Yes,
there for
yes.
us. And they were always eagerly learning as well.
That's excellent. That's excellent. We actually have to pause for a minute, but when we come back, we're going to tell our listeners a little bit more about how you all, the three of you, are getting together to give your knowledge to folks and to be an inspiration. So you ladies have a show. So we're going to talk about that when we come forward here on KBLA Talk 1580. All right, glad that you're with us and you're staying with us here on Urban Wellness Now today. I am Cynthia Brooks, and today we've been talking with three doctors, Dr. Riaja Johnson, Dr. Kamoya Johnson, Dr. Sophronia Johnson. They are sisters, and they apparently have a great relationship because they're working together. They have a new show on YouTube, and it's also a podcast, I believe, as well, where they talk about their journey, their experiences, and give all of you some inspiration. So tell me how Three Docs and a Mic got started.
Sure. So Three Docs and a Mic sort of got started. It started with me. I was the first doctor in the family, and they affectionately called me D1. So it's been a while until we had another D2 came along, which was Dr. Kamoya Johnson. And then shortly thereafter, Dr. Riaja came along. So I was like, great, we have three docs now. We're three Dr. J's. So what can we do with this? Because this is a very unique experience to have 3 of the 10 children to go on to get terminal degrees. So, and especially 3 of the girls to get terminal degrees. So what I decided was, well, what I really was thinking about was how can we share our story? What can we do since this is unique, since this is a different way? And then coming out of Oakland, California, 3 little brown girls that grew up and now you have terminal degrees, we have a story to tell. So we came up with the title of Three Docs and a Mic. And this basically just gives a insight to our journey. We want to make sure that we're sharing our story that may motivate or may encourage another person in order to continue on their journey. We all have 3 very different lives. We grew up in the same house, but we're 3 totally different people. So it is interesting, even in our conversations, just to hear the differences. Be like, oh, I never thought about that. Or, oh, I don't remember anything like that. So it is always funny just to sit down and to talk. And then that we do work well together. And then that's inside the community, inside our house and our home, but also outside of the house and in the larger community as well.
Some of the topics that you talk about are just kind of everyday things that happen to us as women, as people, like stress and mental health and self-care and that sort of thing.
Right. So I'll let Dr. Kamoya or Dr. Riaja, if you want to jump in to sort of chime in on the topics that we've discussed so far.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, we just try to make it, as realistic as possible for humanity, right? And so we're all struggling with these things, no matter how high you've gone in education or, how much money you grew up with. And so we're all human beings and we're all, trying to live life. And so just normalizing those things that oftentimes, people don't talk about because we've been made to feel ashamed of those things, and even how we show up, and even some of those bad behaviors that we show up with, right? Given the different circumstances. And so we talk about those things and what we've done. We're just telling our story, right? We're not trying to give advice or fix anybody. We're just telling our story. This is what worked for me. Maybe my story can help you. And that's really what it's about. It's really a storytelling process that, in somewhere in there that maybe other folks can find some little gems so that they maybe won't make the same mistake as us, or if they have, they can think about things a little differently, right? What they've tried maybe didn't work, and maybe trying, something that I've tried. We also encourage folks to share with us too, because we don't know all, right? And so maybe they've tried something that I've never thought about. And so we definitely encourage folks to leave comments and share and just tell their story. I love restorative justice. We do storytelling, and that's what I love to hear. And so just tell your story.
And Dr. Riaja, how can folks find you, find the show, and maybe reach out to you all?
So you can find the show on YouTube. Just type in the number 3, Docs, DOCS, and a mic, MIC, search, and we will pop up. Additionally, if you want to get in contact with us, we have a Facebook page, 3 Docs and a mic. We also have a public group, 3 Docs and a mic. So with Facebook, our public group is the same as YouTube, the number 3 Docs and a mic. And for our page, you actually have to type out the number 3. So it's a little different with the page. So you have to type. Yes, so you have to type out the number. So THREEDOCS is like the first name, and then the last name is ANDAMIC.
Okay, just like a name, all words, all letters. Yeah.
All letters, correct.
All right. All right, we're going to pause again. And when we come forward, some final words from our doctors about everybody living their best life. Summer is here and we all kind of get a new outlook. So stay with Urban Wellness Now here on KBLA Talk 1580. All right, once again, thanks for staying with Urban Wellness Now. Urban Wellness, where we talk every Saturday about different things related to health and wellness and living your best life. And the 3 Doctors Johnson, Dr. Riaja, Dr. Kamoya, Dr. Sophronia are all sisters, and we've been having a great conversation about their journey and how they help each other, how they help the public in their respective fields. And in our final 3 minutes, ladies, what can you tell our listeners about just, stress and dealing with life as we move forward with lots of different political issues going on, lots of medical, lots of turmoil, just life turmoil in general? Dr. Riaja, you want to start?
Yes, I would say make sure that you are cognizant of what you're putting into your ears and into your eyes. You can control how much you listen to various things. And if you've noticed that those things are impacting you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, turn them off, because things are coming at us at a very fast rate. And some things we can't control, but there are some things that we can control. So just be cognizant of how things are impacting you and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Do something that you enjoy doing and that you love and value, and make sure that your life, that the steps that you're taking each day are leading you towards your valued living and not away from it.
All right. Dr. Kamoya?
Yes, I would just say have grace for self and others. And lean into practice. So choose one thing to practice on, get better at, develop your skill set.
Excellent. And Dr. Sophronia?
I would say to like my sisters just said, to really look at those things that you need, but also to have grace. But another thing I would add to that is always to find your happy. So whatever it is that you wake up in the morning that's going to make you happy, make sure that you do that and accomplish that for that day. And that may look different from day to day, but as long as you're still on a journey to your happy, then the journey will continue on.
Excellent. Love it. Love it. Ladies, thank you so much. What an inspiration. Three sisters who are also three doctors who have a show, Three Docs and a Mic, and who are just on their journey and helping others live theirs. We appreciate you very much for what you do, and best wishes to you with the show and whatever else you come up with in the future.
Thank you for having
Thank you
us.
so much. for
Thank
having
you
me.
so
Appreciate it.
much.
Absolutely. All right, that is Urban Wellness for today. Thank you again for joining us. And remember to catch KBLA 1580 on all the social platforms and the Urban Wellness Now on Facebook. I'm Cynthia Brooks. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And Michelle Duffy and the Backstory is coming up right after the news.
Thank you for being with us. We're sending you love, light, and positive energy. And remember to proceed in power.